Hello and welcome to episode 231 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is March 4th, and together with Robert and Goran, we're here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone. So today we're going to deviate a little from classic SAP and Microsoft topics. Millions of development projects are done on GitHub. In most cases, when I look at my own project, it is just about pushing data to a GitHub repo and that's it. On our SAP on Azure video podcast website, it's a small exception where we do some automation, but you can do much, much more with that. So Christian Lechner from SAP is the expert on this for me. He has not only done some amazing things with Terraform and BTP, but also automated almost everything in his GitHub repos with GitHub Actions. So in order to give us a better insight and overview of what you can do with GitHub Actions, I'm very happy to have Christian back on our show. Welcome, Christian.
Hi, Holger. Nice to be back again. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's fantastic to have you again. So for those of our viewers and listeners who have not seen your previous show on or previous episode on our show, maybe you can quickly introduce yourself again.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Christian. I'm working as officially called development architect at SAP. And as you already mentioned, since more than a year, I'm more or less exclusively focusing on the topic of Terraform for SAP BTP and let's say all things around Terraform, how to make customers' life easier when using Terraform and when using SAP.
And you just released a video series, a learning series on BTP and Terraform. You have a lot of tutorials, guides out there. So this is all also really a great resource. I actually have to admit, I'm still not done yet. I mean, I told you that I'm working on it and I'm almost done, but I'm not finished with all the. There are also a lot of optional exercises in the class, but I'm not done yet. But I'm still working on it.
Yeah, there is quite some stuff to do, and that's right. So for everybody who wants to start with Terraform, we now have what was formerly known an Open SAP course, now a massive open online course on learning.sap.com, which guides you through the topics of how to get started with Terraform on SAP BTP, starting from scratch, moving to, I would say, some quite advanced topics around that area.
Really, really cool. And I think when one of our last discussions, you had shown me some of the new automations that you have done with GitHub Actions, and I was actually so impressed by all the things that you can do in the meantime. Because it's, I mean, for me, honestly, as I said, most of the things I just push something to a repo and that's it. Then I have it documented there, and that's good enough for most of my work. But some of the things that you have done are really, really amazing, and not only from a simplification point of view, but also from a code quality, from a security point of view. There's so many things that you can do, and then you also recently published a blog post talking about some of the things that you can do with GitHub Actions. So yeah, maybe you can give us a small glimpse, a starting point at what you can do with GitHub Actions.
Yeah, for sure. So that was kind of motivated by exactly the Terraform projects that we are currently running and starting to run. Because we have now several GitHub repositories that are part of the SAP organization on GitHub. So that there are some basic quality measures that need to be in place. But of course, if you now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 repositories and you have to manage them with a team of finite size, you will be quite eager to automate a lot of stuff. And as we are completely running on GitHub, on github.com, I have to say, with those projects, we really try to leverage everything that the platform gives to us. And yeah, try to automate a lot there. Especially the annoying stuff if you have to do some clicking around with issues or pull requests and so on. So that's also something that annoyed me a lot, and that's why I automated it.
Cool, cool. So instead of clicking 10 times, you said, let's spend some time to
Let's,
see how we can click these, how we can automate these things. And
yeah,
now you have, I think, a fairly big library of actions that you can leverage.
absolutely. Yeah, maybe I start sharing my screen, if that's okay.
Yes,
Um, then let's
absolutely.
let's look at the truth, at the code. Um, as you already mentioned, due to our discussion, I created a little blog post because I thought it might also be interesting for other folks
Hmm.
to check out what's possible with GitHub Actions, because GitHub Actions, from my perspective, are often pushed into the area of, yeah, it's a CI/CD environment, which is
Hmm.
true, which is perfectly true. But you have a lot of other features in combination with GitHub Actions, maybe some stuff going a bit beyond GitHub Actions, but you can really make your life a lot easier. And as I said, especially if you handle open source projects,
Hmm.
because you have interaction with the community, you have issues that come in that you want to, well, pre-filter maybe, that you want to handle automatically. We will see that in a few minutes what's all possible or what we think makes sense for such a repository. Um, yeah, so we have several repositories. As I said, we will now take one new member of the Terraform family, so to say, the Terraform exporter CLI.
Hmm.
If you don't know what Terraform imports or exports are, that doesn't matter. Just take it as a repository that's on GitHub, that's public, and that is used to interact with users, to open issues for feature requests, for bug requests, and so on and so forth. And the code that we publish there should have some basic quality baseline, um, so that we are not ashamed what we publish there. That's kind of the idea. Now, I would propose let's walk through what's there. So
Hmm.
the main magic is happening in the .github folder, and I will switch to the Visual Studio Code, where I have things open here. So that's exactly the repository. Let me close that one. Where I have the GitHub folder. And as you can see,
Yep.
there are several subfolders here.
Hmm.
Now, as a baseline from my perspective, there are two things that should always be in place. One is updating your dependencies automatically, checking for updates, especially if there are some security issues or something like that. But anyway, you want to stay up to date with dependencies. The project is to 90% Golang. So what we did is we customized or configured Dependabot to be executed.
Hmm.
Um, the format for all the GitHub actions is YAML. There is no discussion about that. If you like it or if you don't like it, you have to use it.
You have to use it. Hmm.
It's no discussion there. Happy to discuss if YAML is a cool format, but you have no choice. And with this Dependabot, we already cover, let's say, on a daily basis or for dev containers on a weekly basis, if there are updates for example, GitHub Actions, for our Go packages, and on a weekly basis for our dev containers that we offer to make development or contributions a bit easier.
Christian, just a quick,
Um,
so
yeah,
Dependabot. Dependabot just helps you to check for new versions. Is that it? And here
basically,
you
it's
specify what are the packages that it should regularly check.
yeah. So it's really a bot that checks for new versions of packages.
Hmm.
And if you correspondingly configure it in your security settings, it will also bring in pull requests for security issues.
Oh,
If there
okay.
is the
Hmm.
option to do something like that. So if a package got mentioned in a CVE, and it has a security incident, and there is a new version that you should install, then Dependabot can do that for you and create a pull request. Same happens here. So if it finds a new Go library that we use, and there is a new version for that, then it will create a pull request. There will also be some remarks around what's the compatibility and so on. You have to take that with a grain of salt, but you don't have to care about the pull request. So it's all getting updated automatically. Then you can do a review and so on. That's kind of the, let's say, hygiene requirement for dependencies. As Dependabot says, you can also use Renovate. That's also something that we use at SAP internally. But if you're on GitHub.com, why not use the tool that they anyway use? And then we have the more fun part, the workflows. So under .github workflows, we have all the workflows that we use in our repository based on the events. And a second hygiene workflow, I would say, is the CodeQL workflow, which does an analysis and check of your code quality. So basically, that's copy pasting what GitHub proposed to us for doing the code checks. As I said, we are in the Golang ecosystem, so this is purely Golang specific, and then we have this CodeQL action which does all the stuff for us, and it's very well documented on GitHub. So this is, from my perspective, from a code quality, code security perspective, the second aspect that should be within every repository that contains code. This is already a quite extensive action, so I will not go into details. It's just keep in mind, Dependabot CodeQL. That's something that you should have in your repository, no matter what you do.
Okay.
There might be ecosystems that are not yet supported, but the usual suspects that you run across in the SAP ecosystem are there. So Java, JavaScript, and so on. And then there is one more thing that I put into every repository, and for example, Martin Pankratz can tell about that because I put it in every repository that we created together. Reason for that is I think everybody ran into a situation where he opened a repository where there were links in the repository, and they didn't work because link was outdated, target was moved whatsoever, and nobody checks or regularly clicks the links. I mean, for what? So I usually also add a periodic link checker.
Okay.
Which does nothing else than checking the links. And how do I do that? Well, if you're not familiar with the GitHub workflow language or the GitHub action language, you basically define at the upper part on which events the workflow should be executed. So in this case, I want to have a cron job, or workflow dispatch is I can start it manually. Then I can give some specific permissions. By default, the workflow does not have write permissions to issues, for example. So I have to explicitly grant that. And then I would say 80% of the cases, what I do is I take actions from the GitHub marketplace and combine them.
Okay.
Because I'm not the first one having issue A, B, C.
Yeah.
Like checking links, and there is one. So it's called Leechy action. No idea where that comes from. But this just checks, are the links working in your repository? You can also exclude some links that should not be checked. For example, if you have some local host descriptions in your README files, you can exclude them. But this check just runs. And then, as I don't want to check, still too lazy to do then checking the GitHub action flows if they run into an issue, I want to create an issue if the GitHub action fails.
Okay.
And I do that by just adding two other actions from the marketplace, which first look up if there is an existing issue for
cool.
a broken link, as you can see here. And if it finds that, it reuses that. If not, it creates a new one. And there I take another action, create issue from file. So I take the output from my check, transfer that to that action, and then I get a nice report which links fail as an issue in my GitHub repository. So I don't have to wrap my head around, did the GitHub action fail or not? I just have to open GitHub in the morning, check if there is a new issue, and here we go.
Nice.
And that's, I think, something, especially if you do tutorials or something like that.
Yep.
This is something that you should have in place. That's kind of the super baseline from my perspective. Then I also added, because we have documentation in this repository, of spell check. There are also tons of actions in the marketplace that you can use. I use this spell check GitHub action here. It works for me. If you have a different one, use that if it works. But as you can see here, it's super easy to implement that, and giving some quality measures to your repository. It's not like I have to code a lot of bash script here or JavaScript or don't know what in order to make a spell check whenever pull request is opened for my markdown files. I just have to use the checkout action, which checks out the repository into the runner of the GitHub action. So think about the GitHub action workflow as a virtual machine that spun up, where some things are installed, and then you can execute all those actions. And this one just copies the content, or checks out the contents. It's a Git checkout indeed, from the repository, and then the spell check is running.
But then what happens if it finds some spell check issues? Now,
this one is triggered whenever I open a pull request.
Yeah.
And within the pull request, I defined that this spell check needs to pass.
Okay. Yeah.
And if it does not pass, which is basically every time the case when I change something with a markdown to make a pull request, I don't know, I have really a hand for that. It runs to a red status, and I can check what's happening. But I see it in the pull request. That's why I don't open an issue here.
Yep.
Because the only way that changes can come into the repository is via pull requests in my case. So that's why I don't open an issue here.
Perfect.
Yeah. So that's kind of the baseline. Now, let's say we interact with the repository, and probably you want to open an issue, or for a feature request, or for a bug report. And if you take a look at the issues, let's jump to the repository. Let's take anyone, doesn't matter. You have a lot of stuff to do, right? You can do labels, you can assign projects. So this is GitHub projects. It's kind of the one central project board that we use for our repositories. We want to assign a milestone, maybe, depending on a pull request we want, on an issue we don't want. And if we create a new feature request, we want to make people aware, hey, we take feature requests seriously, but only if there is enough interest in the community. So let me shortly jump to a feature request. So what we want to do is we want to add this community note.
Cool. Okay.
Telling folks, hey, if you open a feature request, hey, that's cool. We like that. But for anybody who stumbles across that feature request, we want to make sure that you know the let's say, rules of the game. So if you want to vote up, press the thumbs up button, and we are good to go. And it's open source. If you want to do a pull request, be our guest.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And this is something where we want to, well, basically default the labels. We want to assign the project with a default status. For an issue, we don't want to add a milestone, and we want, if it's a feature request, to add this community node. Now, this is, again, all done by a combination of issue templates as well as GitHub Actions. So what we do is GitHub decided to use YAML also for issue templates, of course. At least it's consistent. And with that, you can already pre-assign labels. So this is nothing that you automate via workflows, but this is something that you put into your issue template. And the nice thing about issue templates then is that you have some kind of making life easier for the reporter with respect to what they should enter. Because if you come as a maybe newbie to a project, you don't really know, you know there is an issue, you know that you want a feature, but you don't know what information to provide. And so we said, hey, let's make the life easier and use this customization, like text areas, like drop-down menus, etc., to make the life of the user easier. Same, of course, for a bug report, where we have checkboxes or input fields or drop-down areas that the user sees, and which helps him to continue in his filing a bug or filing a feature request. Now, once that is done, what we want to do is some default work besides the labels, which is assigning the issue to the central project, because that's a click that I had to do every time when an issue was there, assigned to the project. And as we have one central project, which is not connected to every repository, we have to do that manually. And again, that's the code. So whenever there is an issue opened, blah, 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 and then just use this pre-configured action, check out the project URL. You have to have one dedicated GitHub token for that. But that's it. So one click less with just 3 lines of code. Now let's see that in action. Let's say we want to do kind of a feature request, and let's say we want to add code owners. And as you can see here, it's not just a markdown file. It's really, I have here dropdown. I can say, okay, what area do you want to see improved? Well, it's not directly the CLI commands or something. It's something else. Please add code owners to the repo. You also see there are some mandatory fields. There are optional fields. So describe the solution, add code owner file, responsibles. And this is something that we won't fill. This is something that we won't fill. And as you can see, there is a lot of tips and stuff around that. So let's create that one. And as you can see, the labels are already pre-populated by the template. And now it takes a bit for the GitHub Actions to pick up.
Because now we would expect the community voting.
We now see suddenly the project appeared.
Ah, nice. Yeah, okay.
And we see the community voting.
Cool. Okay.
And now this is not the flow how it should be, but as I'm the administrator, I say, of course, we will do that. I will put that into progress, and this will be part of the next milestone. So now I already
Oh, nice.
prepared that. So I added a code owners file here. So what I will do now is do the pull request. And for the pull request, I want to have the same functionality. I want to have the labels assigned to my pull request. I want to have the project assigned. I want to enter me as assignee. So if you take a look at, let's shortly jump a bit back and forth to confuse people. If you take a look at this pull request, I want to be automatically assigned, because if I open the pull request, probably it's me. I want to have the project. I want to have the milestone, which should be the next milestone. In our case, it's the release candidate 1. And then I also want to have the label there. That's a bit more tricky. We enforce conventional commits, which means that the commit or the pull request name has to have a certain format. We ensure that via, surprise, surprise, a GitHub action, that there is either feature or bug, feature fix or test or doc or something like that. And based on this conventional commit, I can add the labels. So let's shortly see how that looks like. So what I will do now is I will create a pull request. I'm using the GitHub CLI for that. So as you can see here, I have, now it's not a feature request, it's Quire. It's kind of a technical thingy that I want to add. And we also have a pull request template, which I can open up here and say, okay, add code owner to repository. And then I say this closes issue. And of course, I did not remember that. 303. Which will then assign the issue to the pull request. This is something that you can always do. This is other. This is set up. Yeah, how to test, blah, blah, blah. And then we have a little checklist for the reviewer that you can fill in inside the pull request, or you just do it here. And you're good to go.
Nice.
And then we can open the pull request. And I like the GitHub CLI because now we can directly jump to that one. And as you can see, it's quite empty here at the moment. We just have this feature request added. And now, again, let's shortly refresh things. Yeah, here we go. Yeah. So we have the project there.
Project.
Come on, GitHub. You can do better. I have me assigned.
Now it's populating.
Now it had to some warm up, probably serverless or something like that. So you have some warm up time. So it's assigning me. As you can see here now, as this is a Quire, this is nothing that should go to the release notes. This is nothing that is for the external world. It's more like internal setup. So that's why the labels are that. We can set the status now to in review. We do not automatically set it because maybe somebody wants to still work on that one, but wants to open it up. So that's why it's that. And we have the last milestone attached to that. And again, as I said, this is all GitHub Action magic.
Cool.
So we have really this set default values for the PR. And that is now a bit more tricky. So we already know, hey, we can add it to the project. But then there is no action to add the creator as an assignee. There is no action to add the next milestone on the marketplace. And the reason for that is not that nobody needs that, but the reason for that is that it's quite easy with either the GitHub CLI that is already installed in the runner, or via the GitHub API that is also available in the GitHub Action Runner to do that. So for example, here, that's the code that is needed to add me as or the one who opens the pull request as an assignee. It's just calling the GitHub API because within the action, as I said, you are on a virtual machine. It's an Linux and Ubuntu. And then you just do the call, and that's it. Now, adding the next milestone, this is something that I scripted inside of the action. It's always a question if how complex the code is. You can also call Node.js scripts from the action. Now, this was not complex enough from my perspective to outsource it into a dedicated file. So you have a GitHub script action which already authenticates you, and that's cool. Against the GitHub API, which is here, this little guy. And so what I do is, or this one, I first list the milestones and say, hey, sort that stuff, and then I take the next one and update the issue with this information. Now, there is one point worth to mention. Pull requests are issues, technically, with some additional functionality on top. So if you skim through the REST API of GitHub and you say, holy guacamole, why is there no API doing for pull requests what I would like to do?
Okay.
Probably you should look into the issues. Because technically underneath they are the same. There are just, I think, 3 further API endpoints that are available for pull requests.
Okay.
So that's something that I struggled a bit. And then there is, I think they call it AI nowadays, an if-else setup to set the labels. So that's basically the magic there. So even if there is no predefined GitHub action that you just have to drag in, the GitHub API is quite straightforward to use. There are a lot of examples also in the documentation to do that. And yeah, it's straightforward, and be aware there is a REST API, there is a GraphQL API. I'm probably too stupid for GraphQL, so I'm always going with REST. But the same is possible with GraphQL.
Nice.
So that's kind of one aspect. Now, what about issues where you have to request more information from the reporter, and the reporter doesn't answer, which is not the usual game at open source, but it's happening too often. So what you want to have is you want to mark at some point in time this issue as stale, and then you want to automatically close it. And you don't want to always look through the issues and check, hey, is there already an answer, and so on and so forth. So what we did is we decided for a flow that we say, okay, if we want to have an answer, or we need more information from the reporter, we label it. We labeled the issue with needs author feedback. And whenever there is a new comment on the issue, this label gets removed automatically. That's this one.
Oh,
again,
wow.
not really complicated. So it's just action remove label. And just removes the label. So whenever there is an issue comment created, it's thrown away. That's kind of if we get a response. Now, if we don't get a response, we have also an action, which runs again as a cron job, which is one of GitHub's default actions, which is cool. And there you can define, hey, if a PR or an issue gets no feedback, after 15 days, post the first message, and after additional 5 days, remove it. And the subject is all issues with this label.
Nice.
Again, something that you don't have to wrap your head around. Let's see. I have an example for that. So here, I asked the question and then added the label, and then there was no answer. So then last week,
And then you give
there
a
was the first
reminder,
message.
15 days. Then after
15
5
days.
days.
There is then an additional label that gets added to the issue. And if you remove that, the countdown starts from the beginning. But if this label, the stale label is there, it says, okay, from that point on 5 days. And if then it's still not closed, then or answered or some activity given there,
Yeah.
throw it away or close
Cool.
it.
And that's basically done all completely automatically. So you as a person, you regularly see if there's a new bug coming in, for example, then you say, look, I need some additional information. So you set the label, and
Yep.
after that, you don't have to think about this anymore, because
Exactly.
the bot will automatically send out some reminders and then clean it up if nothing has happened.
That's exactly the point. Yeah. So you can really clean up your issues. If
Yeah.
you need feedback, you get it or not, but you
Yeah.
don't have to wrap your head around, did that guy answer? How long is this issue open? Do I have
Yeah.
does it make sense to close it? No, it's obvious. So this one, the GitHub action says, hey, you have it's open for 15 days with no activity. I will close it in 5 years. In 5 years, in 5
In
days.
5 days. Yeah.
And then after 5 days, if there is no activity, it's closed. And that's all really, it's not really complex to do that.
No. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's really super easy. Now, of course, we have also some more complex workflows, like testing or releasing. So whenever we open a pull request, of course, we want to run tests. And that is more extensive. But again, it's not rocket science. So it's basically what you would also do when you develop locally. You would want to check if linting is in place. If it's correct, you want to check if the documentation was regenerated, because that's something that you often forget. You want to know if the build works. So for Golang, I mean, you wouldn't do that for Node. And then we have some funny stuff. We have to do. We have to attach to Sonar Cloud, which is then some code coverage magic happening there. We have to do that. I wouldn't have done that. But yeah, it's also not really complicated, because there is a GitHub action by Sonar Cloud that you can use. So you just have to export the coverage report, the code coverage report, the test coverage, and then upload it to Sonar Cloud. There is just one thing for those who are really working with GitHub Actions, who are using Dependabot, that I want to stress. If you're using external tools and you transfer some tokens there in order to interact with the API, Dependabot by default has no access to that token. So whenever there is a pull request opened by Dependabot, the Sonar Cloud step here will fail. And you say, why? Why is this happening? For me, it works. For Dependabot, it doesn't work. The secret is there. Well, yeah, it's there, but GitHub will filter that one out if Dependabot is the actor. And you can heal that by jumping to settings, secrets, and there is this Dependabot section.
Okay.
And if you ask yourself, why is there Dependabot? Well, that's because you have to put the tokens there.
Interesting. Okay. So then it has access to the tokens.
Then it has explicit access to these tokens. So I think we have more here. Yep, we have much more here, as you can see. But Dependabot doesn't need to have access there. So it makes sense what GitHub did there. I would have hoped for a more offensive documentation for that. But yeah, that's something that you have to keep in mind. And of course, we then also have the release stuff done by GitHub. So we use Go Releaser, which is, I would say, one of the standard tools to do a release. So that builds your libraries, and then it builds your project, and then pushes the binaries depending on your build architecture to the repository. And Now let's see. So this workflow is now really a bit more extensive. So you can do quite extensive stuff there. It's not like all easy, but that's also doable. So when we do a release, we push a tag to GitHub, and then this release workflow gets triggered. And we do the tests, we do build, we do Doku generation, we do integration tests. We call the Sonar Cloud, we start the Go releaser, we generate the GitHub pages that we also do via GitHub Actions, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is kind of happening all behind the scenes when a release is triggered.
Cool.
And yeah, it's not, as I said, it's not rocket science. You can quite well modularize the stuff. So you can call workflows from workflows. That's all doable. And this way reuse also some stuff. So that's really cool. And now what's maybe even cooler is the release notes, because everybody wants to have release notes, right? So
hey,
I'm asking now, how do you think will this release note be created?
I guess with a nice GitHub action.
Yeah, kind of. So it's part of GitHub Action with the Go releaser and the GitHub basic functionality that I think not too many are aware of. You can use the GitHub pull requests, all the information that you have between two tags that you created, in order to fetch the information what happened in between those tags. So what happened in these 11 commits?
Yeah.
And then just fetch the pull request information. And based on the labels, you can then do some magic around, hey, put it into exciting new features, put it into bug fixes, put it into other changes, or I don't know what. And that's one configuration. That's this one.
Oh, cool. So this is all automatically generated then? It's just these few lines of codes that create this release node.
Exactly. So they tell what's the title and what labels should land under this title. And that's why we are quite keen on having our pull requests labeled.
Yeah.
Because if they are not labeled, well, they land under other changes, which they are there, but I think it makes more sense for a user to see, hey, what are the new features? What are the bug fixes? Are there breaking changes? And that's just, calling Go releaser and telling Go releaser, hey, let GitHub do the stuff around the release notes. And there you go.
Really impressive.
That's really saving a lot of time, because crafting that manually.
For every release, I think that's, I mean, doing it once is probably not a big issue, but you need to do this for each and every release, which can be annoying.
And you certainly forget something.
Yeah.
And what's also nice is that's also a feature from GitHub. That's nothing that we customized, is you get automatically a contributors list. So if somebody is contributing from the outside, he or she will pop up here. And that's always nice. So I quite like that when I did, for example, contributions to the Microsoft documentation. You are quite, I mean, you don't get money for that, but it's quite nice to see that you have contributed and
the recognition there,
kind of recognized. Yeah, exactly. So that's the release notes. I think that's most of the stuff. Maybe I mentioned GitHub projects. So GitHub projects are that there are legacy projects and there is the new GitHub project functionality. We use the new ones. And you can also use GitHub Actions within project, but you don't need to from the start. So there is some kind of visual workflow configuration that you can do within the project. So we are here now in the project, as you can see. And you can set the stuff up there. So super easy. If that's not sufficient for you, this graphic user interface, which might be the case in complex scenarios.
You can again switch to a YAML file.
You can again switch to YAML file. So you can use GitHub Actions to interact with the project, but stuff like, hey, what should happen if an item is closed? Then, hey, set the value, the status value to done. I think that's more convenient also from the perspective of the persona who is using projects. So this might be the Scrum Master, this might be some product owner who might not be into the depth of programming.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good decision from GitHub to do it like that.
Cool.
And as you can see, there is a lot of stuff pre-configured, which is nice.
No,
and now, absolute epic monologue by me. But I think I didn't forget anything. What is part of the blog post?
That's amazing. And I was just going to ask. So now you've shown some absolutely amazing things. And I mean, honestly, yeah, well, for example, this link checker, that is something that I would look into immediately, because I think that is something that I can definitely leverage as well. But how would I get started? I mean, yes, obviously we will put the link to your blog post also in the show notes. And I guess all that you showed us is actually public, right? So I can go to the GitHub repository, I can click here on GitHub, and then I can see all the workflows that you have created. So this can also be a nice inspiration for me to get started on these things.
So you find all the workflows that I showed and some more in all our Terraform repositories. So if you go to the SAP organization and look for Terraform in the search section, you will see there are 1, 2, 3. There's a private one. There's another private one. You will see 2 where this setup is publicly in place.
Yeah.
And you will sooner or later see 2 more where that's in place.
This is so cool. So I'll also link to the Terraform exported BDP, so that this is also a good starting point.
That's the one with the let's say less noise. So we have a lot more flows in the provider repository, but there is also more Terraform specific checks in there. There is a bit more Terraform HashiCorp specific logic and OpenTofu logic in there that might be confusing to start with. So this one I think is the better starting point. And of course, I have to say the GitHub documentation on workflows is really good.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is not hard to set up. The only thing which annoys me to death is you cannot really execute it locally. So there is a project, and I also described it in the blog post, called ACT, ACT, which allows you in combination with Docker to execute GitHub Actions locally. That kind of works for me. However, on a Mac with Apple Silicon, it took me 1 hour to set it up, which already annoyed me. And if you create new GitHub Actions, you always have first to bring them, if it's just the empty YAML file, to the main branch, and then you can work on the GitHub action in a branch where you want to put in the features. That's okay-ish experience, something that you have to keep in mind. But that's, again, as YAML, it is what it is. That's what we get. Maybe not what we deserve, but what we get. And the easy actions, that's not difficult. The funny actions are the one where you do some coding exercise inside. So there are more commits than for them than for the others.
Well, nice. This is really, really great, and you definitely got me excited. I definitely need to spend some time on seeing what is possible, what I can do with actions in my GitHub projects.
Yeah. So I think especially if you do a lot of hands-ons, tutorials, and so on, I think the link checker, the spell checker, the dependency update, and so on, that's something that's worth it. That's also worth it to regularly check. Because for me as a learner, I like to see that repository gets updated from time to
Yeah,
time.
absolutely. Yeah.
And there is no work. The only work that you have to do is to review pull requests, then if you have everything in place. So that's really nice.
Cool. Well, Christian, thank you so
Okay.
much. Again,
Okay.
I'll put all the links in the show notes. Thanks for this cool walkthrough and even on the live projects there, creating a pull request or feature request in our specific case. Thank you so much. That was really great. And I hope that a lot of folks will take another look at their GitHub repo and add a few more actions.
Absolutely. I hope so. So as I said, it is on GitHub.com. You can also do that on your GitHub Enterprise. So if you are on-prem kind of,
yeah,
that's also possible. You have then to have hosted runners. That's how it's called. But everything is documented, so there are no real restrictions there. You can also replicate the marketplace. So if you want as a company to restrict the actions that are used within your boundaries, which makes sense, you can do that. So you can mirror the actions partially and then only allow access to them from inside of your network. Yeah, that's possible.
Cool. Well, Christian, thank you so much.
Welcome.
It was really great having you, and we'll see each other again on the show, I'm sure.
Hope so.
Great.
See you.
Thank you, Christian. Bye-bye.
Bye.